Hey Dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This video will be a complete reintroduction of Fighter Soul as well as to provide you guys a much better reference guide now that it's been 1 year since Fighter Soul was launched. I actually went to rewatch that old video and oh boy, I sounded super uncertain of everything, it's embarrassing. So let's get down to it. Before even opening Fighter Soul, make sure you have some Soul Shards. You can obtain Soul Shards from Arena weekly rewards as well as through adventure farming and auto adventure. If you are still not sure how to maximize your farming efficiency for Soul Shards, please check my farming playlist in the link above because there are 2 videos to teach you how to farm for Soul Shards weekly with ease. Fighter Soul is a skill book with various passive buffs organized according to grades. Some grades have 3 soul skills, some have 2. To upgrade one level of the soul skill, you will need to use a certain amount of soul shards. For example, in grade 1, to upgrade skill cooldown reduction by 1 level, you will need 1500 soul shards. So to max this out, you will need 1500 times 5, which is 7500 soul shards, and the cost subsequently increases the higher the grade. So at grade 2, each level will cost 3000 soul shards. At grade 3, each level will cost 4500 soul shards, so on and so forth, in increments of 1500 up to grade 6. That is why it has taken me about 14 months to get to where I am in grade 6. Beyond grade 6, the increments are too insane, so let's just ignore that. Take note as well, this particular value or limit you have to achieve before unlocking the next grade. For example, to unlock grade 2, you will need to fully complete 10 levels in total. Grade 1 is a special case where you do not have to choose which skill to upgrade because both skills need to be upgraded. However, let's look at grade 2. In grade 2, you have 3 skills but only a limit of 10 levels. In other words, you have to pick 2 out of 3 soul skills to focus on maxing out. It is not recommended to spread out your soul shards across all 3 skills, so once you have fulfilled the requirement for the grade, the next grade will be unlocked and you have to pick another skill to be left out. What's the point of unlocking all these soul skills? Basically to buff your level 50 heroes. Soul skills can only be applied on level 50 heroes. And out of everything you have unlocked, you can select up to 5 to be applied on your level 50 hero. Furthermore, there is also an overall stat buff with every grade unlocked, so it is a very powerful mechanic to benefit fully transcended heroes. What if you want to change what you have unlocked? No worries, you can reset the entire Fighter Soul by paying 300 topaz and all the soul shards will be refunded back to you and you can re-upgrade in a brand new way. Now on to the more interesting part, what to unlock exactly. I can't recommend specific heroes in this part, but I will recommend groups of heroes like DPSs, support and tanks. That's because soul skills can be applied on any hero. Furthermore, with each hero now being able to have 5 soul skills activated, the uniqueness and specificity is reduced. The images you will see are just small examples and they are not restrictions. For grade 1, as mentioned, there is no choice to be made here, but not to worry because both soul skills are very beneficial, especially for your PvE DPS Valika and Shade. This is not just to boost their damage output but also for you to spam their skills as soon as possible. The 1 and 5 target damage boost soul skill can also be used for certain heroes in Arena such as Rin and Cult, since they have both a single target skill as well as a 5-man AoE. Skill cooldown isn't preferred on PvP units because there are better soul skills and also because in Arena there is no reliance on a single hero for skills and you can't control it anyway. So even if one hero is on cooldown, other heroes can still use their skills. For grade 2, we have physical attack, magic attack and defense. I know most players would opt for physical attack and magic attack because these are damage oriented stats and are more visible and applicable to a wide pool of heroes. In this case, both your PvE DPS and every unit in your arena team will benefit. I personally am using physical attack and defense. One reason primarily was because when Fighter Soul was introduced, there was no strong magic DPS. Nonetheless, the defense buff is also good because it gives your PvE support and PvP tankier units more bulk. For grade 3, you have to choose between doing more damage on offensive or magic enemies. I know this can be a tough choice, but we gotta consider the enemies we face in general. In terms of PvP, either soul skill is fine because the meta changes. Sometimes we have offensive metas, sometimes we have magic metas, and some even have a hybrid of offensive and magic heroes. So either one will work. However, for PvE, there are a greater number of offensive enemies than magic. Based on this reason alone, offensive takes the win. If you prefer fighting against magic enemies like Isabella, then by all means go for inflicting damage on magic enemies. For grade 4, we have 3 soul skills, and these are defense oriented soul skills. Again, it is also dependent on what kind of enemies you face more often. Frankly, I feel that grade 4 is a more PvP oriented grade because the only areas where you get dealt substantial damage in PvE only lies in high levels of guild raid and high levels of heavenly stairs. So I base my choices based on PvP. For myself, I picked the damage reduction from offensive and magic heroes because clearly those two categories of heroes have very hard hitting skills, and I want to reduce that output. Reducing damage from Universal will work very well for Castle Rush purposes, but probably not for Raid or Guild Dungeon since they do not do too much damage in the first place. And if you have even reached grade 5, you are most definitely considered a veteran already, and you should have unlocked 7 soul skills by now. For grade 5, we have another 2 damage oriented soul skills similar to grade 3, but this time for defensive and universal enemies. Both these categories of heroes are more bulky by nature. Unlocking the defensive will give you more advantage over Galidus in PvE and random enemies in Guild Dungeon, and heroes like Evan, Caesar and Rudy in PvP. Unlocking the universal one will give you more advantage in Raid, Castle Rush, Guild Dungeon and of course in PvP as well. I personally think the universal one will be put to much greater use than the defensive option. For grade 6, you choose between status effect resist rate and status effect cast rate increase. I'll be very honest here, the status effect resist rate is much more applicable in all modes compared to the status effect cast rate, because the status effect cast rate buff is only really active in PvP. There is no way you can cast status effects on PvE enemies anyway. So you may think that the status effect resist rate is a better choice. However, thing is, status effect resist rate is a far more common and accessible buff. Just take a look at your limit break special traits, your resistance accessories, your resistance jewels, your formation buff and your support hero passives. All these put together can help contribute to 100% status effect resistance. However, status effect cast rate is a far rarer buff, only available as a limit break special trait at a low percentage. So that's why I chose that instead, since it's almost impossible to boost cast rate beyond traits. However, that said, given the current context of the game where status effects are becoming more common everywhere in the game, like in Arena, Heavenly Stairs and Guild Raid, it may be very tempting to switch over to Resistance too. For this, we will really have to observe future updates and hero designs. For grade 7, we do need 12,500 soul shards just for one level. I think that almost equates to a month's worth of soul shards. Anyway, we have HP increase, block rate increase and counter rate increase. Definitely go for the HP increase. This HP increase is in terms of percentage, so it can actually benefit a lot of bulky heroes and support units. And think of the combination with the Myth HP armor, be it in PvP or PvE. For PvP, you heal more every turn if you have higher HP. For PvE, you get bigger HP shields if you have higher HP. I'm sure damage oriented heroes won't be given this soul skill. Likewise, the same goes for block rate increase. More bulk overall for support heroes and also units who you need possibly live longer in Arena. But one problem I foresee is that for block rate to really come in handy, you need a hero to have a pretty decent block rate percentage to begin with. That means he or she probably already needs to have at least 60 to 80% block rate on their own for the effect to be visible. This is unlike counter rate. Counter rate will only be used on very dedicated units like Ares, Aragon and Zeke in PvE and Chris and others in PvP. But why would this probably be more useful than block rate? That's because those counter dedicated units will already be built properly for counter purposes, which means the addition of this soul skill for them allows them to possibly save an entire jewel slot or trait slot for something even better, because right now many counter units need not just counter armor but jewels, traits, and sometimes even accessories and masteries for them to achieve 100% counter, and this takes up potential slots where more useful builds can happen. So that is why I personally feel that counter rate increased soul skill has its merits, but until then we will decide again. For grade 8, we have two important stats, crit rate versus lethal rate. I'm sure everyone knows how needed these two stats are, but we can only choose one. I will not talk about the utility of these in PvP because both definitely will be useful there for damage oriented units, but in the PvE context, this really will impact your DPS. So I made a few tables to compare. The first three are for teams with Shane and Eileen and no longer use Lina. In these cases, guild buffs support both crit rate and lethal rate. Shane can use any combination of crit and lethal weapons, and these are where you can put your soul shards in. I made another 3 cases with Lina. Since Lina offers 50% crit rate buff, she basically frees up an entire guild buff option, and your choice of soul skill will depend on Shane's equipment. However, let's look at Velika's case. Usually Velika will always be paired with Lina for immense crit rate buff. So here are 3 scenarios for Velika. Overall speaking, lethal rate seems to have more likelihood to be used. Ultimately, you will need to consider the flexibility of your team composition and equipment. Lastly, for grade 9, we have 2 drastically different combination traits, status effect resist and cast rate, and crit and lethal damage. I think crit and lethal damage is gonna be a very popular choice for PvE oriented heroes because 20% stacked on with all other previous buffs can really lead to a significant increase in damage output for your PvE DPSs. It can even benefit strong damage dealers in PvP. Of course, the 10% status effect resist and cast rate increase also looks pretty significant, but until the day comes when status effects become even more devastating, I possibly will not go for this. And the heroes shown here again are just samples. By the time anyone gets to grade 9, these heroes could all probably be in the storage. And with that, we've covered all 9 grades of Fighter Soul and what you should focus on. Remember, this gives you some form of customization for your heroes, so it is important to farm for soul shards and unlock these buffs. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more guides. Thank you so much and see you!